Hey, welcome back. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about the U.S. Senate race. We've already had several candidates on various programs, TV show, Politics with a Punch, radio program, and now we have another candidate on. We got 24 candidates in the race, and very pleased to have one of them on. We've got a lot of connections with this next guest. We both are on WLAE as a TV show there. Know a lot of the same people, and it'd be very interesting to see how the campaign progresses, because he's got a whole different set of issues he's talking about. Charles Marsala is with us, candidate for U.S. Senate. Charles, how are you? Good morning.
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having me here.
Charles, good to be with you, and let's start off by getting a little bit of your background. Tell us about yourself.
So Jeff, I have 100 years in Louisiana with my family. Most of them live in Monroe, Louisiana. My uncle up there owns the Budweiser distributorship, and my grandfather, Gino, had opened Gino's in '64, and a lot of people have been to Gino's and had the cheese bread. So I have a lot of constituents, so to speak, in Monroe from my cousins and other friends up there.
You still have a lot of family up there?
Probably about 500-600 cousins.
Wow.
So we drove Highway 61 up back and forth for all the holidays. My parents moved here in 1960. I was born in New Orleans. I grew up in Metairie by Clearview and West Esplanade. I went to St. Francis Xavier. I was one of the youngest Eagle Scouts. I made Eagle Scout before I left 8th grade.
That's tremendous.
And then I went to Jesuit. I was student council president at Jesuit. Mitch was a classmate of mine.
I'm sorry.
We did a lot of great things. Mitch and I were in the Spirit Patrol together, and he's done a lot of great things for New Orleans. We disagree on a few issues, but it was good to work with him, and we have a great class of '78. I then went on to Tulane. I founded Experience Wave Craze in 1979 when Tulane beat LSU a couple of times, and did a few classes at UNO and Nichols, and then took a job out west in California drilling for oil. Transferred into designing military bases, the mobility and repair facilities on the West Coast. In a strange way, I got into wildlife photography when I was going up to Alaska to do a lot of work, and then became on the art committee. Went from art committee, Park and Rec Commission, City Council, and mayor of Atherton, California. Worked with Arnold out there for a while. Close with Christine Todd Whitman, who was head of the EPA, and I was Rudy Giuliani's driver when he'd be in the Bay Area. And then I came back to New Orleans a couple of years ago.
When did you come back?
Came back in 2012.
And what brought you back?
Yes, I have a huge family here, huge presence, and Jesuit, Tulane, St. Francis. I had signs up in one room of my house called "Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans?" And part of my success out there had been having Papa Noel's Cajun Christmas Party and San Gennaro with the Mardi Gras Twist events.
So you came back home, and I guess you still have relatives here in the New Orleans area too.
Yes,
probably another reason to bring you back, friends, connections. The left coast, though, is a big difference from Louisiana, isn't it?
That's what you heard when I left. My grandfather was all nervous, but the West Coast is where they build most of a lot of aircraft. McDonnell Douglas was one of my first accounts, and then I went into Silicon Valley and I had the job of designing Boeing's facilities for maintenance and manufacturing. I also had HP, Lockheed. People, I think, see the beach shows, and they don't realize how much industry is in California. It's the sixth largest economy in the world.
But aren't a lot of people leaving California, going into other states like Nevada, Arizona? I mean, aren't there some policies, anti-growth policies, some of the politicians have been pushing out there?
One of the things what I believe I could bring to the table here is that those companies, because where I lived, Y.E. Tittle was a neighbor of mine from LSU grade, and also Meg Whitman lived in my town, head of HP, is that there's a lot of opportunity for those companies to come to Louisiana, because because of the taxes, of the cost of real estate, a lot of their work could be done in a different state. But California itself has, real estate's going crazy because there's such a demand to live there because of the infrastructure and the industry that's there.
Obviously, California, though, has been a state that has been pretty Democrat for a long time.
Very Democrat.
Here in Louisiana, we have a state that's been trending Republican, except for the governor now, who's a Democrat, and we've seen to maybe jogged to the left with the governor. Although the Senate race, we'll see. We've got our outgoing De La Salle graduate, U.S. Senator David Vitter, and it's going to be wide open, and Jesuit graduate here, Charles Marsala, one of the ones trying to run. So are you running as a Democrat or Republican?
Oh, I've been a Republican, and actually I was on 12 different Republican groups in the Bay Area. What I found is that people didn't think the Republican Party had a
There
presence.
are Republicans in the Bay Area.
I always saw so many people that say I'm the only Republican,
Okay.
and there was 20 different groups with people, about 700 saying that. So we would have a big summer event at my house, 600 people would show up. Carly Fiorino was actually at one of our events. She's going to be here in 2 weeks at the Louisiana GOP event. So there are a lot of Republicans in the Bay Area. People don't realize the strength that we have.
Republican candidate for U.S. Senate Charles Marsala is with us. Got a very interesting background. Grew up here, worked out in California, now been back for the past 4 years or so. So give us some of your major issues that you're going to be focusing on, Charles, in the race.
So I was a big fan, and still am, of Teddy Roosevelt. I covered a lot of the national parks in my drives out west. Teddy had a big presence here in Louisiana. He went to North Louisiana, he's been to South Louisiana, and the environment is an issue. One of the things that's on my mind is the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And I came back here I studied that when I was at Tulane, and I'm surprised that we really have done nothing about it in 35 years.
Tell us about the dead zone. So in that dead zone, there's nothing living, no fish, nothing?
You know, as you said, I have a show on LAE, and my idea was I brought back the concept to WLAE of doing the old Mutual of Omaha Wild Kingdom. That I'd get some footage of Africa, but we'd also talk about how threatened a lot of these animals are. We were down at the coast filming about coastal restoration, and I met some of the shrimpers down there who told me that there's a 6,000-mile area that's dead. And that, I found as I researched it, is also impacting Monterey Bay, California. We just heard Vero Beach, where the Saints trained, had a huge fish kill this year. This week, Lake Erie has a toxic problem. Chesapeake Bay has had closures. It's
So
huge.
what's causing the dead zone, and is it growing?
Well, yes, it is. We now have 500 dead zones worldwide, and as you see, I brought a couple of things to show you here.
Yeah.
What we started changing about 50 years ago is how much chemicals we use in agriculture, and actually on our own yards and on golf courses. So all that fertilizer, and what's also found out, Roundup, it doesn't break down. So when it drains down into the Mississippi River, or any river, that way, for that matter, in the world, it brings down a lot of nutrients. It's called its fertilizer. The algae bloom, and when the algae die, the bacteria that take care of the that eat up the algae suck up all the oxygen that's in the water. So the fish have to leave. So that's why it's called a dead zone. It's actually hypoxic is the scientific word. It means the parts per million of oxygen in the water can't sustain life. So this area is 20 miles wide, the length of Louisiana, all the way to Galveston.
And it's growing.
It's growing. They started reporting in 1955. We opened up a center in 1983. It's in Cocotree. There's a lot of great scientists studying it. They've monitored. And then now it's 6,000 square miles. It's the size of Connecticut and Rhode Island.
What can be done to combat it?
Well, one of the things that I found out is we actually Congress passed, which is one reason why I'm running for Senate, is to get to Congress and change some of the laws. We created the ethanol desire to quadruple the amount of ethanol we have and produce. So that means more corn. So that means up in Iowa, they're growing a tremendous amount of corn for the Energy Independence Act of 2006. I'd like to see that modified. I think when they put that in, they did not realize that how much more fertilizer would have to be used to grow that much more corn. And the fertilizer comes down to the Gulf and ends up at Grand Isle. The current pushes it west along Louisiana, and we have this dead zone now.
Charles Marsala is with us. It's marsalaforla.com is the website. Now, obviously, coastal restoration is also a major issue, right?
Yes, 2 days ago I was at Mardi Gras Pass. I was also down at Jean Lafitte watching how they're pumping the sediment down there.
Yeah.
And Mardi Gras Pass has some issues, and I applaud what they're doing with the coastal restoration on that. But they had an opening at Mardi Gras Pass, a valve blew out, and you can just see it. It's not doing exactly what they're watching it, but it's causing some havoc because it's actually eroded a large area, and it's moving some of the sediment into the channels where the fishermen need to get out. Plus, again, the nutrients have closed 3 oyster beds down there. So it's actually causing the oyster fishermen to switch to shrimping because of this coastal restoration concept. However, in Jean Lafitte, they've actually used a pipeline, and they're dumping it exactly where it needs to be. They've already recreated 2 square miles of coast down at Jean Lafitte. I was there last weekend meeting with the residents down there. The theme of my campaign is a smarter conversation. By talking to people, and what we're doing is hearing what's going on and getting down there firsthand. We're actually make 2 documentaries on this as well through my TV show, which is about wildlife issues. We've been interacting with these people for about 2 years on these issues.
So the environment is a big issue for you, protecting
Absolutely.
the environment, and obviously restoring the coast, dealing with the dead zone. As far as the environment goes, what kind of job is the EPA doing? What would you recommend as far as fighting the problems that we are having with the environment? And do you think we need to do more with the EPA or less?
Well, what caught me, and right now, if you probably have heard, people with the flesh-eating bacteria that's been down in the Gulf, people have actually lost limbs from Baton Rouge, have been swimming in the Gulf, and they've had to close the beaches. So the EPA on one end, again, it's a mandate that we're growing so much more corn and we're using fertilizer in ways we never did before. So, on a side note, I'll tell you a funny story here. The movie The Birds, which was a blockbuster hit, was based off of a toxic algae bloom in Monterey Bay. You know the story.
Yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock was there in
Yeah.
1961. He saw all these birds go crazy because they ate the dead plankton that was infected. And then he made a movie about it, but he didn't say in the movie what it was about. In coquetry, Louisiana University scientists took them years, but they figured out it was based on some of the chemicals those birds ate.
Wow.
And it just worked its way up the pipeline.
Charles, hang on. We'll take a brief time out, come back with a lot more with our special guest. U.S. Senate candidate Charles Marsala is with us. He's number 18 on the ballot. We'll talk about his logo here in a second. Also, what he wants to do as far as elephants, how he wants to protect jobs and seniors and veterans, and a whole lot more. Our talk line 504-556-9696. Our email address is Jeff@WGSO.com. Jeff at WGSO.com. Let's take a brief time out. We'll be right back. All right, U.S. Senate candidate Charles Marsala with us. Marsala4LA.com. Check it out.
Water is our most precious resource.
Yeah.
And I did meet with Governor Kasich when he was in town here about the dead zone and what he was doing in legislation on Lake Erie. I'm not sure which lake the Chinese are doing that in. That state needs to take some action, but also you got federal waters there. We had a lot of water issues in California because there's a drought going on in California.
Yeah. Well, I was in Napa last year. My goodness, total drought. I mean, the river was dried up. It was scary.
Yes, and I covered all of my previous job. I had all of California, so I drove the reservoirs.
Yeah.
We would never have considered letting anybody take our water. So the fact that some area would be letting that happen, I would be totally opposed to that. I'd have to find out the details on who gave them that trade agreement to let that happen. I also am opposed to some of these trade agreements we've had. In manufacturing, we lost a lot of companies in California that went offshore. Once the internet arrived, they were able to do things in worldwide economy. So the trade agreements are a major issue, and I assume that's part of a trade agreement that allowed China to take our water.
So do you have a position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
I'm opposed to it, and I'm a mechanical engineer. A lot of my clients went out of business with these trade agreements because they made parts that Boeing bought. Boeing started making them overseas. So we've had some really bad trade agreements. One thing I do like about Mr. Trump's statements is that the trade agreements have made no sense.
Tell us about Miracle Grow and Roundup.
Well, we covered a little bit about that earlier,
Yeah.
and that is part of the dead zone issue. And that
Okay.
100 years ago we didn't use as much chemicals upriver. So now they're using a lot more chemicals when they plant the crops. They actually put Roundup in that. These chemicals don't break down. So they last week, if you Googled Lake Erie, Toledo, you'd find out that they have a huge problem with they've backed it up to Roundup. Now, again, we don't want to put people out of business. I was initially studying chemical engineering, but now we're finding out that this stuff causes these algae
Right.
blooms, and it's just not, we're not going to live if we keep it going the way it is.
All right, let's talk about caffeine. You've got a lot of products here that have caffeine in it. What's wrong with caffeine?
Well, one of the things, there's nothing wrong with caffeine in moderation. However, I had a friend who basically had a caffeine stroke because we now have loopholes in the caffeine laws. You have to say how much caffeine's in a Red Bull, but if you use natural caffeine, you don't have to disclose it. So they are selling energy drinks right now in large quantities through multi-level marketing, and when this person was taking it with other drugs, it reacted with them. And the amount of caffeine in there, as I traced it down, was 200 milligrams in a packet. So you're taking 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. With any extra caffeine, a Coke, anything else, you can set something off. So we now have caffeine in peanut butter, 150 milligrams in one peanut butter sandwich. If you do that, it doesn't have to be disclosed. So you have it on both ends. You can have the youth and you can have seniors taking these supplements not knowing how much caffeine they're taking.
So you think we need to have more disclosure?
Absolutely. Why? It'd be so simple. Natural caffeine, synthetic, you disclose both in milligrams. And I've been working with that for 2 years with Congress, and I've gotten nowhere. I mean, it just mind-boggling.
Why
to me.
is that? Why is that?
I feel like what we've focused on more so is we're polarized right now, and I'm running really a bipartisan deal. I was recognized very well in the Bay Area for what I did with the Democrats as a Republican. To get things done, you have to work that way. Since I've been back in town, most people have gravitated towards me as a moderate person that you can approach, and I feel right now Congress is very polarized.
So you would consider yourself, Charles Marsala, as a moderate Republican, as a
Absolutely.
Teddy Roosevelt Republican, as a Nelson Rockefeller Republican? Give us some of your role models.
Teddy was a big fan. Obviously out there, I did very well under Ronald Reagan. I got started under him.
Although he's considered a conservative.
He's considered a conservative. But conservation, one of the biggest merit badges I got, my dad was the counsel for, was conservation of natural resources.
Right.
So as a conservative, we should be wanting to conserve. So conserving the environment, and we implemented rules that were not necessarily laws to impact, but carrots to help. However, if you're making chemicals that are going in the river that just aren't going to break down, that's an issue.
What's your stand? Some environmentalists have raised concerns about the Keystone Pipeline, about drilling, about oil and gas, about coal, and that's one of Donald Trump's real points, saying, hey, he's going to be more aggressive in exploring for energy here, and says that Hillary's going to make us still dependent
Here's where the
on the Middle
moderation
East.
comes in.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of Keystone. I went out to California as an offshore drilling engineer. So in the early days, I was doing directional drilling, and that's what I studied. We need oil and gas. We need to be able to do that. Again, when you can do things, but you got to make sure that you don't let somebody get carried away. Because what I found is, like somebody abusing caffeine and selling an energy drink when it's too much,
Right.
or putting a chemical in something that's not going to break down.
So how do you protect, you're talking about protecting energy jobs, how do you do that?
Well, one of the things that we have to do here in Louisiana, it's finding a balance. And again, I go back to the conversation, and Governor Kasich brought in the energy people, he brought in the farmers, and he found ways that both could compromise and find a solution. One of the things would be, I've had a lot of conversations with IBM, an app. If it's going to rain like it's raining now, you would tell the farmers, don't put the fertilizer on the ground because it's going to wash off into the rivers. IBM's bought the Weather Channel. They could easily be telling everyone, if you're putting fertilizer down in the next 48 hours, it's going to end up in Grand Isle. Don't do it.
You're talking about defunding ISIS in Africa. Tell us how you're going to do that.
Jeff, that is one of the main reasons why I'm running, is that I got involved a couple of years ago. Somebody asked me for my political expertise to see what I could do on ivory and elephants. Elephants could be extinct in about 20 years. And as I looked through that, what I found was, and this goes back to the Bush administration, Juan Zarate, who was a security advisor to him, pointed out that ivory funds terrorism. And there's numerous articles been written on that. It's become very popular in the last year or so with Al-Shabaab, the large resistance, ISIS, and Boko Haram using elephant ivory as cash. So I wrote a bill that I actually sent to Congress 2 years ago. It says if you increase ivory and wildlife trafficking, rhino horn and lions, to RICO acts, as opposed to creating it like a deer antler right now, which is what it's done under the Lacey Act, and a financial crime, we would stop it. They crushed 7 tons of illegal ivory in the United States in the last 2 years. As you know what we're talking about. And it got through Congress, but none of the 2 people I'm running against endorsed it. So it got through with 45 endorsements of Republicans and 60 Democrats, bipartisan.
But not Charles Bustani or John Fleming?
Neither one of them got behind it. It's in the Senate. It's been there for 15 months as S-27. It's been in committee. Nothing's been done. I really want to get that through, because why wouldn't you do the low-hanging fruit? If we say we're stopping oil and gas money from Iran, from ISIS, but here you have them now using animal parts, and there's 8 countries that have 8,000 ISIS fighters in Africa. So let's take care of that. If we can't get through that, something's wrong.
So how many elephants are there in the world now?
500,000.
Okay.
Down from 5 million about 100 years ago.
And you're worried that they could become extinct except in zoos, right?
Exactly. And also rhinos, lions, we're talking 20 years, all 3 of these animals could be gone. And what we were able, in Louisiana, we actually brought back the black bear, we brought back the pelican, we brought back the alligator. We actually should be teaching this. We actually should also be hosting a conference here where we bring in our scientists to show people about the dead zone worldwide. There are now 500 dead zones. Louisiana could be established as a place, and a senator could do this, holding conferences here on these topics, on how we've changed to take care of.
What else do we need to do? What else would you propose that we do to try to stop ISIS? Because obviously we're seeing more terror attacks going on here and across the world. Seemingly they're becoming more widespread in their attacks, not just confined to the Middle East.
So I was a former mayor of a town, and one of the things that I think we're going to have to do is prepare SWAT. We trained our police officers on how to take care of a shooter at a school. And I sat in, I went on many of these deals. We had maps of every school. If they said there's a shooter in a classroom, our police knew where to go. We worked with the county, because it takes in more than one police department to respond. What we saw in Orlando and some of these other venues is that you're going to have very detailed SWAT teams to take care of America first. Because and as I've paid attention here and talking to the FBI, as far as the amount of security that goes on at the convention center, the Superdome, it's intense. So we actually have to make sure we have funding to take care of that. I would oppose the immigration policy. I think that is a Trojan horse.
What about Hillary wanting to bring in 550% more Syrian refugees?
That's what I mean. I would oppose that immigration policy, yes, because it also takes money away from education. We're going to have 2 languages being taught in the schools. Cities are going to have to fund that. That's what I call an unfunded mandate. And I think we have to get rid of unfunded mandates. If the feds want to do something like that, they've got to come up with the money, and they won't, because they're taking it away from veterans, health care, and other issues that need funding to try to bring in these extra refugees.
What's your border policy?
It needs to be built. And actually, I'm going to be speaking tomorrow night at a town, which you wouldn't think about it, but you can find that the farm workers are realizing they're losing their jobs.
Where are you speaking?
I'm being Donaldsonville. I was there yesterday for the flooding, meeting with the people, and it was amazing to see how much is needed for infrastructure. So as I was talking to them about what's of concern, I found out that they are for the wall. And the idea is you have so much immigration that they can't make a living because we have so many illegal immigrants.
Yeah.
If you're here fair, I had a business.
Not just people in Donaldsonville, I think people across the state are for the wall.
Across the state,
yeah.
And
I'm certainly for the wall.
I had a small business in San Jose, California. My
Yeah.
partner was Latino. I mean, there's a lot of great people, so I want to make sure I don't go that way at all. But the idea of unfiltered immigration, where it's an open door, is not working.
Yeah.
And I'm really concerned that what ISIS did to Turkey, where they just come across the border, that our border not being protected would lend itself to doing that.
All right, we'll come back with one more segment with you, Charles, and give you a chance to talk a little more about your platform. We appreciate you being with us here. Congratulations on running, which is a big accomplishment, being a part of this historic field of 24 candidates. Our talk on 504-556-9696, U.S. Senate candidate Charles Marsala with us. Got a lot more to get to. Also in the 10 o'clock hour, our Ringside All-Star, Donna Carol Voss, is going to be with us. Tickets to give away to Blue Bayou and a whole lot more. So let's get a news update. We'll be right back. Got another segment here with our special guest, U.S. Senate candidate Charles Marsala, who's with us. We're not doing enough as far as airport security. People are coming in here through our airports that could be threats to this country, and we need to crack down on it. Charles?
Well, we know in Egypt a plane was taken down because, and that's obviously a soft target, so to speak. If you could put a can of Coke on an airplane that's got a bomb in it, we've got a problem. And that's going to be a very laborious and complicated solution to try to make sure that we don't allow workers or someone to get a job as a catering person at an airport and be able to smuggle Coke that's actually a bomb in a Coke can on a plane. And also, as the caller talked about, actually TSA and people coming through as well. The vetting, or as we saw in Syria, where the passport machines were stolen and people can then print their own passports.
Right.
It just backs up. So the idea that we now need to do a lot more vetting before we let people come in is clearly makes a lot of sense.
We've got, of course, threats that we've never faced before. We're being targeted like we never have before. So obviously, I think we've got to be worried about our airports. Also, of course, our southern border and the Canadian border, because that's where some of the 9/11 hijackers came through. Our border with Canada.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things, again, with this Ivory issue was right after the mall in Kenya was attacked.
Yeah.
They said that they wanted to go after the Mall of America. And in my opinion, what we've been doing with schools and preparing for shooters at schools, we need more security as far as soft targets. I'm surprised we haven't had more of an issue here in America so far with a mall or a sporting event. because we are such a porous community of people being able to come in.
Charles, got a few more minutes. We'll squeeze in a few more of these issues that you want to address. How are we going to protect senior savings?
Well, one of the things that's happened is, I'm talking from personal experience. My dad grew up in Metairie, left mom with a house and a small 401k. But if you need some type of medical benefits, you have to drain the 401k, or maybe Medicare would touch the house. However, under certain laborious deals, and I'm a financial advisor now, you're able to exclude the house. And we need to do more things that would allow people who have worked hard all their life, that have a legacy. And my book that I told you I was writing is 6 Steps to Leave Your Legacy. It's based on...
So you're working on it?
It's written, it's actually been approved by our compliance department.
Yeah.
The 66 topics have been approved. The intros have all been done. It has not gone to print yet.
Okay.
That's where we are.
Okay.
And then being able to protect long-term care so someone doesn't lose everything. There are some means to that, but it's very complicated. The average person isn't going to be able to figure it out.
You talk about access to veterans benefits. Explain.
Veterans who are just key to our livelihood here in America, what they've done to protect us. They do have VA loan mortgages, there's VA health care, there's also small business loans for vets when they come back to try to help them get started. Going through that and working in that industry, I found that it's, again, very laborious. We haven't done enough to facilitate what resources are available to vets.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see that we make it easier for someone
Is our VA doing the job for our veterans?
Well, we've already heard that it's not. And, in small towns like, say, Monroe, or you're driving from here to Monroe, if a vet lives up there, they need to be able to just go to their doctor. To drive all the way to New Orleans to go to a VA hospital, we need to do more where we expand the ability for private partnerships so someone doesn't drive 3 hours to wait months to get into New Orleans. Great facility, but again, the country's so big.
Yeah. So we need to give them access to health care where they live, right? I mean, a doctor of their choice.
That would be so much easier, then the care would be better on that line.
And then what's your education policy?
On the education policy, one of the things IBM has done with LSU is IBM and LSU have partnered to create 900 jobs in Baton Rouge.
Yes.
They have tech and writing code is a great opportunity. I believe we made a mistake in losing the film credits here in Louisiana, and as a senator... Yeah,
we've seen a lot of jobs flow out, but that's a legislative issue, state legislature.
But as you know, a senator, you're going to run with those people and you'll have some influence.
Right.
In Monroe, CenturyLink opened up a big facility, and we were able to get them here based on partnerships with the universities. Global stars here from California. So those things about California moving to Louisiana, there's a great opportunity to do more of that.
All right, we've got about a minute or so. Let's talk about the monuments. Are you fighting for these Confederate monuments to stay up here in Louisiana, or do you agree with your classmate, Mitch Landrieu, that they need to be taken down?
That's another reason why I got in this race. That's one thing Mitch and I disagree on. And I actually spoke to the city council. I told them that when I was mayor, we were sued 3 times for abusing a nuisance ordinance.
Yeah.
And I said they should have talked to their city attorney about what they were doing. There's a federal law that protects the monuments if they're on federal land, but that needs to be expanded. Because I also think, and I've done a lot of commercials, these guys, we want to call them Confederate monuments, but Beauregard, for example, ran the Louisiana militia. He put the streetcar lines, he built the customs house, he dredged the Mississippi. So if you look at the man's life, his whole 80 years of what he did, it's phenomenal what he did for Louisiana. And there's a barracks outside of Shreveport called Beauregard Barracks because he was the first head of Louisiana National Guard. So if we look in general what those monuments were about, we might find a different story. Each monument should have been looked at individually with a pro and con to look at this. There's a much better means to do hundreds of thousands.
Why was Mitch Landrieu pushing this, you think?
I think, and we have common friends. And in general, I'll say that somebody told me Mitch in his heart felt he was doing the right thing. So I take him for that. And that wasn't from Mitch, that was from a mutual friend. I think he felt it theirs, and some of my other friends I've talked to feel it is...
I think a lot of people I've talked to have really lost a lot of respect for him because of all this.
Having been in that side, and I said this, I went to the city council meeting in January, and I praised them because we had people who wanted us to ban football, and we actually banned football in our town for a little while by banning the whistle. So if you're on the city council, you realize that there's an issue, you're trying to resolve it, and you don't necessarily catch the whole picture. And again, going back to my theme, the smarter conversation, they needed to back off, and I suggested that back off and slow down. It was done so fast because of something that happened in North Carolina.
South Carolina, Charleston.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
It's got nothing to do with Louisiana. I mean, it's just ridiculous that it was, the factor that pushed Mayor Landry to act here. And these monuments have been up for over 100 years.
There's 20 states that have 2,000 monuments. Louisville, Kentucky's got a similar issue going on. Shreveport does as well. It's time for the feds to step in, and I would push through amending the federal law that protects monuments so that if there is something that truly should come down, that's a possibility. At the same time, it prevents the city council from being pushed too fast to do something.
Charles, tell our listeners how they can get hold of you, learn more information about your campaign.
Sure. Well, tonight my show is on at 8 o'clock, and it happens to be World Elephant Day. We actually have a great coloring page, so if you're home today and you're looking for something to do, download the coloring page. You can talk to your children about how to save elephants. Our website is marsalafla.com. We've got a great shirt with a logo on it of a very angry pelican about addressing some issues there. Our Facebook page is marsalafla.com. We have a YouTube where we've got over 40 YouTube videos about these policies that I'm pushing. My first 100 days as senator, we would get so much done that needs to be addressed to make Louisiana.
All right, Charles. I'm sure we'll be talking in the days ahead. Congratulations on running. Thanks for being
Jeff,
with us.
thank you for having me here.
And best of luck with your campaign.
Thanks for watching. To join the smarter conversation, visit marsalaforla.com.